Welcome everyone to this ClimaTalk interview today. My name is Leonie and I'm here with my colleague Hayat. We are going to interview Cindy Forde today. Cindy is a founder of Planetari, an education platform aligned to the UN Sustainable Development Goals that equips children to be the innovators for a better world. In addition, she has also been engaged in many ways for a sustainable future. For example, she helped to form the Great British Oceans Coalition, persuading the UK government to establish the largest marine protected areas in the world. Also, Cindy works with Climate25 on an emergent movement for global governance of the biosphere and adequate protection of the global commons. And she also campaigns for She Changes Climate for full inclusion of women at COP26 and all decision-making on planetary issues. And today, we will talk with her about education and sustainable development. Welcome, Cindy.
Hi, it's great to be with you. Thanks very much, Leonie and Hayat. I'm really pleased to be here.
So it's lovely to have you here, Cindy. So to start off our first question, we want to ask, how do you think education about sustainable development is included in educational curriculum and how it should be?
Well, I think that's a really good question. I mean, the government will tell us that it is included, but if you listen to teachers in the Teachers for Climate Truth Coalition, they will tell you that students in the state system can easily go through 11 years of compulsory education and hear climate change mentioned fewer than 10 lessons out of approximately the 10,000 lessons that they will sit through. So I think the current answer is that it's in a very, very ad hoc way. There's nothing systemic about it. It depends if the teachers are engaged in the issues, then they will include it. It tends to sit in geography, possibly biology, but it's a very marginalised subject. And I think that's a huge problem, particularly when you get into the secondary schools, because unless you're taking those subjects, then you don't encounter the topic at all. And teachers get very frightened to include anything that isn't on the examined curriculum. The whole teach to test is a real problem here. I think primary schools, as I say, if you've got a teacher that is aware of these issues and wants to bring it in the classroom, there's more space to do it. But it's so ad hoc that's a massive problem, considering that how we understand how planet Earth works is critical now to our survival as human beings. So something really does need to shift in how we teach the rising generation.
Yeah, so I'm getting that it's quite subjective at the beginning and like the early stages, and then only unless like as you grow older and you specialize in a certain subject, that's when it kind of you start to really learn about it.
That's when you'll get it, Hayat, but even then it's still in this very siloed way. So it's not cutting across all subjects in the way that whether we live here sustainably or not cuts across all aspects of our lives. It's shoved into a silo, which isn't adequate for the challenges that we have to face as human beings.
That's great. So Sydney, you are the founder of Planetari. Can you tell us what Planetari is and what it has to do with sustainable development and climate?
Sure. So the impulse behind Planetari is, we're asking the question, how do we scale education fit for the future in time to make a difference? So, it really is this understanding that unless we transform our relationship with Earth, how we live here as human beings, our survival chances are getting less. So we really do need to equip children to be aware of these challenges and to be able to face them. Now, I think it feels like quite a desperate time, especially, I'm sure we all saw the IPCC report on Monday, which doesn't tell us anything we didn't know, but it's quite overwhelming to see it all in one place. But there is a hugely positive story to be told there. And I think that for children to confront that wall of despair is totally unproductive. I mean, we have a massive opportunity for transformation here, to do something brilliant. We'd say to children, no, this is a wonderful time to be alive because you get to learn how to fly a small planet, which is really the proposition that's on the table. So that's the that's the angle that Planetari comes at. We have this roadmap for the future, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, 17 clear signposts to where we want to be in 2030. So Planetari takes those goals and turns them into learning adventures for children, which really are expeditions of exploration and discovery. It's how we're here, we're in a little bit, we have without any doubt these challenges, but in understanding what they are, we become the innovators and the entrepreneurs of a much brighter world. So it's quite an exciting place to be for children. And I genuinely believe that it is where we are as human beings. We do have this opportunity to transform how we live. And in some ways, we transform our consciousness. So we become a better and more evolved species. So I hope that summarizes what we're trying to do with Planetari.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, you said it a little bit already, this transformation to a more sustainable system, let's say, and also the environmental crisis as such is multidimensional. And also your work touches on many different topics, as we have understood. So how would you say can and does education bring all of these topics together?
Well, I think that if we look at where we're at with, the world leaders now, it's really shocking. I think about 3% of people in the world go to university. So we have really highly educated people who are making the decisions that have brought us to where we're at. So there's something really dangerously wrong with what we're teaching people in, from schools all the way through to university, that the end product is people who are so focused on one single denominator, really value in one dimension, money, that everything else is considered valueless, to the point that we're now facing systems collapse. So it's clear that education has a hugely important role to play in how we enable our from whether they're ordinary citizens to leaders to think on this planet. And you can no longer teach this model of extraction to extinction, of focusing on one single indicator of progress, GDP. We need to look at the world in a much more multi-dimensional way, understand value in several domains, including the environmental domain, including the social domain, the social justice domain, inclusivity, diversity. If an ecosystem is monocultural, it collapses, and that's kind of what we're facing here as a byproduct of a monocultural education based on the Industrial Revolution. So we need much more diversity in how we teach children and to bring the subjects together. If you look for the answers in physics, you won't find them. If you look for the answers in biology, you won't find them. If you look for them in history, you won't find them. But if you start to put those things all together, you get a very different picture of how we live on Earth, what we've done to Earth, what we need to do moving forward. So the education now needs to come out of these subject silos and create something that does actually reflect the web of life, and for children to have the fundamental understanding that we're part of a web of life, and that we teach from that point rather than from the component parts, which make Earth look like some kind of random machine, which can just be be used for these individual resources and have no understanding of how that affects the whole body, the life support system that sustains us. So really time to reflect our understanding of Earth as an integrated system, a life support system in how we teach children from the word go. And that's what we're looking to do.
Absolutely. I think breaking up this silo thinking is so important to understand that everything is kind of connected and that we are living in systems rather than in linear processes. And this is a very, very important point, not only for children, but also, for adults. Is Planetari also working with adults on these topics?
Not really. Our focus is with children, but I think you really raise a very good point, because so many adults, it's a very desiccating existence. So many adults, we're trained to specialize and to focus on this single thing, which could possibly reflect something that we had an interest in or that we like. But when you're asked to dedicate your entire life to one single aspect of yourself as a career. I think that's a really desiccating experience, and I think that most people find that so. But because our economic system says, oh, well, you're only valued if you can do this thing, then you only do that thing for your whole life, which can be quite unfulfilling. And that people are actually given a chance to understand themselves as a much more complex organism, who the things that you bring to society are valuable in multiple domains. I think that you end up with more fulfilled people as well. It all makes sense because we're doing the same thing, but in different parts of our society. We're reducing things to these single parts, which cause the problems on a planetary level, and they cause a problem on a personal level, because you end up, very unfulfilled and frustrated in terms of what you're allowed to do to make your living here.
Absolutely. And there's also many ways of doing this or designing education, let's say. And you, for example, are currently working on a children's book that is called Bright New World, and that will be published in 2022. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about what is it about and how is it telling a story, maybe?
Yeah, it's really reflecting what we're trying to the messaging for Planetari, which I think is a message for society. We do have the possibility, we still have the possibility of creating this wonderful future. If we keep telling people that it's too late and it's too horrible and it's going to fail, particularly children, there's no interest in engaging. It's a very depressing message. So the point of Bright New World is to really inspire young people to realise how we can create a blueprint for a world that works for everyone. And the premise is we start in the future, we look back from when we've actually used ideas that already exist now and we've implemented them. So 50 years from now, we don't specify, but we look back from a world where most of our global challenges have been mitigated, have been addressed. It's not perfect, but it's working. And then we look at where we're at now. So we take a very realistic look. So these are the issues that we're facing. And then we look at, but these are the solutions that already exist. So the major thing is thinking differently. If we think differently and we have the courage to walk this road, then we can walk into a future that looks a lot better than it does today. And it's really telling children that it's going to be beautifully illustrated, beautifully presented, so that it has this wow factor. Yes, we can be there, but it's grounded in absolute reality that the solutions are already on the table, and we just need to shift our mindset. That's the hardest part of what we face, and we can get there. And back to your point, Hayat. Sorry,
Okay.
No, go ahead.
No, carry on.
I was going to say about your point about the science, because we're blinding people with science. There's so much scientific research now that it's patently obvious where we're at. We don't need to be looking for more. I mean, the scientists are doing an absolutely wonderful job. Of course, that needs to carry on, but that doesn't mean that we need to stay frozen in the headlights looking for more science when the solutions, the road out is already quite clear. It's signposted. We don't know exactly where it's going to go, but we can start walking in a very positive direction.
So it seems like just from your answers that this is like a real passion project. So how does it feel being able to make a career out of something you feel so strongly about?
Well, I think it's a real privilege. So I'm extremely grateful to be able to do it. But I also think that that probably reflects how we do need to live as human beings, with a purpose. I think if you get up every morning and you have a purpose that connects you to your wider world, to making the world, shaping the society in the way that you want it, you're much more motivated to be here, to get up and do what you want to do. And I think that is all about what we're talking about in terms of transformation, because if every morning people get up and they go into these soul-destroying jobs, which are really about creating obnoxico, to borrow a word from Buckminster Fuller, when you're just, you're creating things that are really have no intrinsic value apart from to create wealth for a model that's fueling our demise. It's a really dispiriting experience, no matter how much you wrap it up in, you're doing a great job and here's your promotion. You effectively know you're working against yourself, because we are all interconnected, and ultimately you know that these jobs are part of the problem, and they're very high, even at a higher organizational level. There's more perks and benefits around them. At some of the lower down the pecking order, you entirely feel like a drone. So I think meaningful work is something that is so important for us as human beings to be able to engage with, while being realistic that work isn't all, it's not all going to be about fun and games. But I think having that impetus to work is hugely rewarding, though it's not without its challenges. Leonie and Hayat, I think most of us that work in this space have walked out of careers or career paths that would be far more lucrative, that would be far more safe, that would be far more, that give you the stability. At the moment, we are pioneers, and we're jumping off the cliff professionally to say, these are the kind of, this is the path that we feel entirely strongly that humanity needs to go on. If somebody doesn't start walking, then how the hell are we ever going to get there? So we've taken huge risks in our careers, in our professional lives, to start doing this kind of work, because you are having to define against the system. So you're not, in the initial stages, you're often not rewarded for this kind of work because it's too dangerous and it's too risky to tell the stories that we're telling. But once you start walking, you can't stop really. And so you just keep going and believe that you're on the right side of history.
Absolutely. So Cindy, like, an overall impression that I'm getting from your wonderful and really meaningful work is that you believe that social justice, inclusion of women and Indigenous people, as well as people of colour's involvement and participation, would really help in tackling the climatic issues we're currently facing. Why do you think organisations and governments have been so slow to adopt and push for these marginalised groups' involvement?
Well, that's another excellent question, Hayat, and thanks very much for your kind words about what I'm doing. I mean, I can't, I don't think that we can ignore that there is institutional misogyny and racism. I think people aren't aware that it's there. There's a huge amount of blindness. The fact that in COP21 in 2015 in Paris, if you look at that picture, 193 countries who have gone to make decisions about the biggest, the things that are going to affect our planet. You see if you can find the women in there. We're very upset about what's happening with COP26 because there's such low visibility of women. It happened in 2015. It's been happening for such a long time that people don't even see it. People don't even see it. I can't tell you how many times I'm in a room, I'm the only person of colour in that room, often the only woman, often the only person of colour. I'll turn around, I can be in a room with 200, 400 people, and there's a scattering of us. If you ask somebody else, did you notice that? They will say, no, we didn't notice. So there's an absolute blindness to it because people have become so used to not seeing us. And it's not that people aren't out there doing superb work. I mean, it's absolutely shocking going into COP26 that there's no defined forum for Indigenous people. That is so disgraceful. I can't even begin to say, but it's passed as normal. This is about shifting what the lens of normality. It's so defined by your white male elite that they cannot even see what isn't present. And unless we do that, we won't find the solutions, because it's back to this monocultural thing. Yes, they as a group, I hate to generalize and lump people into something, they'll have some very interesting ideas, things that are valuable. But if you're just doing this monoculture, in the end, you get collapse. And that's what we're looking at here. So you have to bring in diverse thinking and diverse understanding, diverse voices, diverse ways of being on planet Earth to create that resilience, which we so desperately need now.
Yeah. That's completely it's an amazing point you brought up. So have you personally had any success in helping to promote the engagement of, not engagement, because it's not as if, like you said before, that then there are these people are not here doing the work. It's more so they're not being involved when it comes to decision making. So have you had any success in helping to promote them and like helping their voices be heard a little bit more, so to speak?
Well, I guess that's, that's my lived experience, Hayed. When I go into the room, I am representative of minority voices. There is this need to really create a pipeline, because I think in the global, I've spent a lot of time I'm half South American. I lived a long time in Southeast Asia and sometime in the Middle East, actually. So when you're in the global South, you're in the communities of people who are really working on these issues. When you get back into the West, all the people of color just disappear. And some of that's to do with people feeling franchised enough to participate. And some of it is building up, is enabling pathways for people to build up the experience to be involved. And so again, back to Planetari, when you're working at the children's level, you have this opportunity to redefine society. So with all the materials that we create for Planetari resources, they're so multidimensional. The intention is to show children all around the world, being that you each hold these different pieces of the puzzle to dispel this image of, oh, here's these poor little brown people over there who need our help. These poor little brown people over there are hugely active and engaged citizens who hold a really important piece of the puzzle. And for children of all colours and races to see themselves as active participants, so that when as they grow up and step forward, they don't see the barriers that so many of young Black people do see in our society, because they are there. And it does take courage to push against those doors. It does take courage to stand alone in that room. And no matter how well-meaning people can be, and you're either not invited in, or when you're there, you do feel very other. And those are quite intimidating positions to be in. And it takes confidence and belief that you are actually going to make a difference. And when you get some of the, this last race report that was authored by the Conservative government, that's just like a hammer blow to progress. It sets us so far back, basically legitimizing institutional racism and a really monocultural view, that's so disheartening to young Black people coming up. You just feel, what's the point? And that can be so dispiriting, that you set off and you walk a very different road. You think, I'm not franchised here. My voice won't be heard here unless I toe the line, like some of the I hope I'm not going into controversial territory here, but it's quite dispiriting to see people like Kemi Badenoch and Tony Sewell standing behind these. In some ways, you feel very sad that they only feel safe if they're putting across views like that. If you have a voice that is dissenting to what the Conservatives want to hear, you're shut out and you're delegitimized and you're gaslighted. So those can be very serious barriers for people to feel that they can participate in the Western context.
Talking about participation, I perceive you as a very powerful woman with a strong message, and the message that we really need also in climate policy. So I'm wondering, have you ever been to a conference of parties, also called COP? Or any other international climate negotiation, or are you going to, and why or why not?
Well, I haven't been to the COPs to date. Partly it's because where I've been in the world geographically, it's been not possible for me to get there, or very impractical for me to get there. But also there is this sense, I'm going to spend all that time and effort and money going, I don't have a voice, there's nowhere for me to sit, I can mill around talking to people, how can I really make more of a difference than with what I'm doing already? There's some of that in there. With this COP, I'm trying to collaborate with my ecosystem to make sure that we're creating spaces for young people to have voices, to have proper representation of youth, of young, racially diverse voices there. So I'm working within the network to do that. Yes, I think it probably is important to be present, but there is this thing, if you're present without power, then, if you look at the decision-making team that's been picked by this government, you know, from September there were no women in it, and then you put in a woman as a token, I'm afraid, somebody who has such a background in fracking and environmental destruction. It's, you know, it's I think we need to work within the system for sure, but we also need to advocate and to push from outside of the system to show these, you know, to show where these absolute inequalities lie. Because I'm very worried about the team, you know, particularly the British team that's going to COP26. I can't see that they've really got a mindset to make the systemic changes that are needed. So, you know, it's a matter of working within the system and working without the system as well.
So what do you think would change if more women would be included, maybe in particular in the UK delegation for the next COP?
Well, I mean, I think it's a matter of survival, really, having women's voices. I think the end game of this male-dominated model is visible. It's taken us to the brink of systems collapse. So if, you know, to use the Einstein quote, we can't change the outcomes with the same thinking that creating it. So sending the old boys club to solve the problems that they've created, it's like sending the mafia to sort out organized crime. It's just, I can't with any sincerity say that it's comfortable seeing them go to take these decisions. And if you bring in whether, you know, I think men and women, there's a masculine and feminine continuum, so it doesn't have to be all, but you bring in voices who can understand Earth differently, we will get different outcomes. If you just bring in the same voices, you'll get the same thing. It's extract to extinction. It's ruthless competitiveness. You know, it's a single focus on GDP. And there's such brilliant, capable women who are able to think in a much more multidimensional, systemic way. And we have to have that at the table if we're going to come out with the solutions that are going to make a significant difference. And we have to have a radical difference made now, or it's game over.
Let's imagine the delegates are listening to us right now. If you had the chance to talk to them in one sentence, what would you tell them? Well,
I think it is, you know, it's about having the courage to make the radical systemic change that we know is vital to changing the outcomes. And I think you've got to look at that in terms of governance structure, like the laws that are coming up to stop ecocide, headed by the brilliant Jojo Mater. There's organisations working on global governance of our shared ecosystems, which can shift things relatively quickly because you're putting the global commons under global stewardship. And so wealth distribution, instead of people like Bolsonaro being able to hack up the Amazon as a commodity, those Amazonian countries are paid to keep those parts of our vital support systems healthy. So there's brilliant thinking out there, but it takes courage to do it. And that's what I would like to see from these leaders, you know, shape up or step down. You're unfit for purpose unless you're prepared to go in there and take radical action, get out the way and let people who can really think differently have the chance to turn the fortunes of humanity around.
Just to go back to the points about education and children, what degree do you think education has played in the greater vocalization of today's youth, if any? Because, you know, recently we've been seeing a lot of marches and kids going on strikes on Fridays and like greater participation and engagement of today's youth. So what, how much of that would you say is down to them, like the education system and like the education they've received in regards to climate?
Well, I think it might be hired in counter to that, because I think young people are so aware, they're so brilliant, they're so well informed. We live in an information age now, an age that is very easy to get information, it's very easy to network, and young people are brilliant at that. So it just makes a mockery, really, of what they're learning in school. They're being taught for a world as it was 100 years ago, and they know that. And they're furious about it. And so possibly the deficiencies in the education system is what has fueled this sense of urgency. If we don't stand up and do things, we've tried to go through the system, it hasn't worked. Now we're going around it and we're saying that you need to focus on this emergency and educate us to deal with this emergency, rather than go into school and sit there and be drilled for these quite meaningless exams, which aren't preparing them for a future that just isn't going to exist. So I think that, yes, the education system has had a role to play because of the lack of adequate addressing of the issues that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with the IPCC report just coming out now, it's really like, I think it's triggered a lot of people in really thinking that we have to take action, and action is required like now. So that point about you saying how children, you know, like in today's age, how they're going out and getting this information, and also like almost like a new rejuvenation of today's youth. If they were delegates to today's COP, not today's, but the upcoming COP, how would you think our climate negotiations and policies would look like?
Well, I think the story of the Emperor's New Clothes is absolutely brilliant about children. Children aren't frightened to tell the truth. You know, they just stand up and they say the obvious. And I don't think you can dress up what we're looking at here in terms of, something that's dignified and proper. I think children will call that out. They'll say, we need a much more robust response to this, possibly not in that language. I'm sure you're aware of the organisation One Young World, which is young people who've done brilliant things. They'll say fantastic things like, young activists have an advantage over adults because we have an uninhibited view of the world. We're not affected by cynicism or awareness of how big problems are. We're determined to solve problems. They're not so enmeshed in the politics of what they believe can't be done because you're going to upset the business lobby or the oil lobby or whatever. They'll just go in and call it. We need to radically transform the fossil fuel industry. We need to create ways of including people in society. We're tired of people seeing people poor and unhappy. It breaks children's hearts to see what's going on. And the answers look very simple to them. Mummy, why are we still doing this when we know that it's damaging Earth? They ask simple questions that are so embarrassing because the answers seem so obvious. And yet, because of all the political reasons, we can't make those, we can't take those roads, or the politicians believe they can't take them, and the children don't understand politics. So they're like, why aren't you doing it?
Yeah, 100%. I think kids are extremely truthful and very blunt and to the point. And it's brilliant points you made. Thank you so much for your answers today and for participating. You've really given us a lot to think about. And I think those that are watching, you've given a lot to think about. And you can really see that what you do is genuinely a passion project and something that you love. And so thank you so much for that, Cindy.
Well, thank you so much, Leonie and Hayat, and thank you to the brilliant community of ClimaTalks. I think it's essential that what you're doing, and I'm delighted to be part of your ecosystem. So thank you.
Thank you.